All right, so today we're diving into something that honestly feels like it came straight out of the Twilight Zone. Remember pagers? Like those things we all thought would extinct with dial-up internet.
Right, relics of the past.
Well, somebody forgot to tell Lebanon that because they're back, and not in a good way. A listener sent over this CNN piece, and it's wild talking about, get this, exploding pagers.
Yeah.
Exploding pagers.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about a couple of faulty devices here. This is thousands of people injured, like just going about their day, and suddenly, boom, their pager becomes a mini bomb.
Thousands. It's a big deal.
Yeah, can you imagine checking a message and instead
It's crazy.
it's a scene out of like a bad action movie, you know?
It's a bizarre situation, no doubt about it. And to really wrap our heads around it, we got to factor in the whole context of Lebanon, right? I mean, we're talking about a region that's constantly on edge, politically speaking. And then you've got Hezbollah, which, let's be honest, adds a whole other layer of complexity to the mix.
And they're not shying away from that complexity either, right? Because they're not blaming this on like a technical glitch or something. They're pointing the fingers straight at Israel.
Absolutely. And that's where these seemingly ancient pagers, as crazy as it sounds, become a key piece of this puzzle.
Okay, I'm listening.
See, Lebanon's infrastructure, it's been through the ringer. Years of conflict taking their toll. Pagers, as outdated as they seem to us, they've got this reputation, right? Reliability, even in the toughest conditions. You're more likely to get a signal through on one of those things in a war zone than you are on your cell phone.
So it's less about nostalgia and more about like necessity in a way.
Exactly.
But even with all that, it still doesn't explain the exploding part, right? Like what could even cause a pager to just detonate like that?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. And the fact that this wasn't isolated, that these explosions were happening all over practically at the same time, tells us one thing. This wasn't some random fluke. Someone or something coordinated this.
Okay, see, now that's just creepy. Like someone was deliberately targeting these people.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking about the article mentioned CCTV footage of this guy just in the supermarket, you know, doing his shopping, and boom, his pager explodes. Like that image, man, it's just stuck in my head.
Yeah.
That makes it all too real, you know? These aren't just statistics we're talking about. These are real people caught in the crossfire of, well, whatever this is.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're going to try to figure out today.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about a deliberate attack, not some freak accident.
Yeah.
But how do you even weaponize a pager? I mean, that sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Right. It's a bit wild. The article actually lays out a couple of possibilities.
Okay.
One theory is that this was some kind of remote cyber attack targeting the pager batteries specifically.
Hold on, seriously. Like hacking a pager to make it explode.
It sounds crazy, I know, but lithium batteries, those can be volatile.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a lot of force in those explosions. So theoretically, if a hacker could find a vulnerability, they could remotely access those batteries, overload them, and boom.
So you're saying someone sitting at a computer somewhere could essentially turn everyday devices into bombs.
That's the scary part of this whole thing. The possibility that something as simple as a pager could be turned into a weapon like that.
That is unsettling.
Yeah, though the cybersecurity expert they interviewed, David Kennedy, he seemed to think that the force we're seeing in these explosions, it's a bit much for a simple battery overload.
Okay, so then that other scenario, the supply chain attack, that's seeming more and more likely.
It's definitely a possibility. And if that's the case, we're talking about someone with a lot of resources, someone who could actually pull off something this big.
But how? Like, how do you tamper with thousands of pagers without anyone noticing?
That's where the real mystery lies. Imagine somewhere between the factory where these pagers are made and the people using them, someone intercepts those shipments.
Right.
They get their hands on these devices and they modify them.
But how do you make a pager explode on command like that?
Well, they could have swapped out the batteries for something more powerful, something disguised to look like a regular pager battery.
Wow.
And then once those devices are in the hands of unsuspecting users, all it takes is the right signal to set them off.
That's both ingenious and terrifying at the same time.
Exactly. And it really makes you think about all the technology we rely on every day and how vulnerable we might be without even realizing it.
Okay, so let's say this was a planned attack, this supply chain thing. Who benefits from something like this? What's the motive?
Yeah, it's easy to jump to conclusions, especially with how tense things already are between Hezbollah and Israel.
Right.
I mean, the article mentions that Israel just expanded their war objectives, talking about making sure those towns along the Lebanese border are safe for people to return to.
So Already a very delicate situation. And then this happens.
Right, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire.
Exactly. And knowing Hezbollah, how might they respond to something like this?
This has the potential to really escalate things.
Yeah.
If we're thinking about motive, it could be a warning shot, a way to sow chaos and fear within Hezbollah.
Well, it's definitely done that, right? I mean, just the psychological effect alone, it's huge.
Exactly. People are on edge. They don't know what to trust, even everyday devices.
Well, it's like, how can you even protect yourself against something like that?
Right, and it might go even deeper than that. Imagine if those pagers were part of a critical communication network for Hezbollah.
Oh, wow.
This attack, it could be an attempt to cripple their ability to operate.
So not just chaos, but actually strategically targeting their infrastructure in a way no one would see coming.
Exactly. This situation, no matter who's behind it, it exposes just how strange modern conflict has become. We're talking about pagers, something most people consider obsolete, being used as weapons.
Makes you realize that in this hyper-connected world, maybe we're all more vulnerable than we think.
Right, this whole thing could end up in textbooks, a case study in information warfare, supply chain vulnerabilities, just how unpredictable technology can be.
It's a scary thought. And what's even wilder is that the article, it doesn't say anyone claimed responsibility. So how do you even stop something like this from happening again?
Unfortunately, that's pretty common in these situations. Makes it really tough to assign blame, let alone prevent it.
We're left with more questions than answers here. Who did this? How did they pull it off on this scale without anyone noticing? And what message does this send to everyone else? It feels like we're just scratching the surface of something much bigger here.
And that's the thing, isn't it? If something as simple as a pager can be a weapon, what's next? It's a question we should all be asking ourselves as we navigate this increasingly interconnected world,
Definitely something to think about. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. To our listeners, we'll leave you with this. Take a moment to think about the technology you rely on every day. Could there be vulnerabilities there we haven't even considered? Until next time, stay curious.